Speaker. The Morrison government is taking strong action to further boost our long-term fuel security by locking in the future of our refining sector. And that's been through the landmark Fuel Security Act 2021, where we've looked at the refining capacity to secure ongoing operations of refineries in both Brisbane and Geelong, and that these will stay in operation until at least mid-2027. Now, as part of this commitment, the government will also co-fund $250 million in major infrastructure upgrades. Now, this is important because it will help to lower the sulphur fuel content of our fuels for our onshore refining. And this lowering of the sulphur content in fuel will bring benefits of around $1 billion in avoided health costs due to better air quality. And of course, this will also help motorists to save costs on maintenance. So our fuel security package is important not only for ensuring our short and medium-term support of the refinery industry, but also to make sure that we improve the health of our consumers. Now, the issue with our fuel security package is that there are two things that are coming at us at speed. Firstly, we've been dealing with what is the COVID pandemic, and that has had an effect on our supply chain. There is absolutely no doubt about our sovereign supply chains, whether it's been for medicines, PPE equipment, tests. We've had issues that we've had to address. And that is also true and can be true for fuel security. So it is important that we turn our mind to the issue of how to make sure that we do have fuel security. But it's not just COVID that we've had to deal with regards to self-sufficiency and security. We also have the issue of the world transitioning to a decarbonised economy. Now, Australia has been very fortunate that we've had a lot of access to cheap energy in the past, and we will continue to in the short to medium term. But we are going through a transition, and we're going through a transition which means we need to build the infrastructure of the future. And that's why we recognise that while fuels are transitioning, we need to get ready for a green superpower-led future that is awaiting Australia. And this includes the government's strategic investment in the future fuels and vehicle strategy. And this strategy will help empower consumers to drive the car that they want and to help support an enabling environment by rolling out infrastructure and making the grid electric vehicle ready. Now, the transition that needs to happen, where we move from being dependent on diesel and dependent on fossil fuels, is going to take time. And it is going to take technological development to get us there. But this government is committed to a carbon net zero 2050 and also underpinning the infrastructure changes and technological development and business development that is going to happen to get us there sooner and faster and safer. Our strategy is backed by $250 million future fuel fund that will focus on some very important aspects. Firstly, the public EV charging stations. We know that Australia has some particular issues with regards to being a big continent, and we like to drive a long way. Anyone who's been to Europe knows that they have much shorter distances. Australians love to get in a car and drive a long way. So we need to make sure that our public EV charging stations are supplementing the private EV charging stations that are growing like sunflowers across this great continent. And I do have a number of constituents in my electorate who spoke with me last week about the work they are doing in the private EV charging sector. We know that Get and Jolt are two such EV charging businesses that are growing very rapidly and providing private EV charging. But we as a government are backing in private enterprise and filling the gap with public EV charging. We also understand that household smart charging will be also important for the future. And we also know that we're going to have to deal with heavy and long distance vehicle technologies in a very different way. And these will be fueled by hydrogen, green hydrogen in particular. So as we move from a liquid fuel past that's based on fossil fuels to a liquid fuel future that is based on green hydrogen, we know that there is a lot of change coming to this country. And who do you trust better than us to lead you into that future? Who do you trust better than a government that understands a technology-led development of future fuels, of infrastructure, who understands that industry partnering with government is the best way forward by enabling the gaps to be filled by government, but not the whole thing to be driven by government. By partnering with the private sector to support uptake and stimulate co-investment in future fuels, that's how we get to a greener, cleaner future faster. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
The time for the discussion is concluded.